Welcome back everyone to what will be the third and last episode of the welding table. I'm going to finish it up one way or the other. I would have had this actually posted a little sooner, but when I went to start the next episode, wouldn't you know it, I ran out of wire in the welder. Didn't want to make a special trip to town, so I picked up some wire a little bit later, and I'm good to go on that. So without further ado, I'll pan you down here. You know where we're left off at with the legs attached. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm going to do for some reinforcement. If you recall, I talked about how much deflection there would be with this rectangular tubing, and it was minimal as it is. Then to reduce that even more, I put this cross member on. That way if you push down on one, in essence you're pushing on all of them. And so the last thing I want to do is, actually it does three things. It adds even more rigidity to the tubing to keep them from wanting to deflect any. And it also reinforces the second thing is it reinforces the legs. So I'm going to do some of these pieces here. This is just rebar. When it comes to things like this, bracing, if it's not cosmetically important to have a nice finished piece of tubing or cold rolled or something like that, rebar is considerably cheaper, and it does just fine. So these pieces will go in here in the middle. There'll be four of them, one for each. See if I can prop it up in there. One going to each corner. So in essence, actually it looks like the leg is right in the way. So if you envision if this was flipped upright and you push down in the middle, that means because of this triangulation of this piece, that would have to push out on the leg. Right now with the legs just attached here, they could potentially move a little bit. It would add strength anyway. So once I get all four of those in to prevent the legs from wanting to push out in this direction, as you can see here with this bar, I'm going to run another set of bars all the way around that ties the legs together so the legs can't go outwards, which means this can't get longer, which means this can't go down any. So, and then the other advantage of these crossbars that tie all four legs together is it gives you a really nice place to hang all your welding clamps and vice grips and those things. So I'm just going to set you back here and get all these. These spreaders are cut most of them just long enough that I think they'll hold in there by friction, but I might end up putting a ratchet strap around those to hold everything nice and snug while I start welding it up. So I'll scoot you back here and we'll get these all put in place. Okay, I'll get you in here close. I think you can kind of see what's going on there, but I'll give you a little bit better view. Looks kind of like a pyramid up there. Because those are all being compression load when there's anything on them. It's not like I even have to get carried away with welding them heavily, which I'm not going to do again, as I mentioned before, to cut down on how much things pull so the table stays as flat as possible. So I'll put a good heavy, probably a 3/4 inch long bead on each one of those just to hold them in place, because they'll be squeezed together versus trying to pull them apart. Alrighty, so that pretty much concludes it. I'm not going to put the casters on until I get it painted. So I'm going to get it down off of the trailer do a little touch up of any kind of splatter or anything. And then, because this is going to be inside, I'm never taking it outside instead of taking the time, because I hate having to clean the paint gun. So instead of taking the time to mix up a higher quality paint that would hold up better outside, once I get it cleaned up and some sandblasting done on to put a little bit of, get rid of some of the rust, I'm just going to shoot it with some spray cans of black. So I'll still bring you back once I get started on the sandblasting. So I need to get it off the table, but it's gotten heavy enough that, especially with my knee, I'm still working on recovering from that. I'm not going to try to wrestle it off of there. So this morning when I was thinking about what I had on my plate to do, I was kind of laughing to myself that it's the chicken and the egg, as you know, or if you've been watching, you know the two projects I was going to do next was this welding table and then a gantry crane. The welding table is kind of nice to have first because I'll be able to use it for some things, but on the flip side, right now is when I'm wishing if I had that gantry crane, I could just pick it off there. I could get creative, and I've done that before on lighter stuff, move the trailer over to the other side and use the vehicle hoist. You can put a chain around a couple of the arms, but that side loads it a little on heavier stuff, so I prefer not to do that. So I'm going to pull it outside. The tractor's over at my son's place, so I got to run over there and haul the tractor back, and then I'll get this thing unloaded and get the sandblaster outside. It's supposed to be a nice day today, so we'll get it sandblasted and painted, and I'll throw the wheels on it, and then in the normal fashion of builder to buy it, I will give you guys a roll up of how much money I have in this build as compared to what you could buy a welding table for. It's going to be a kind of an odd comparison because there are so many different welding tables styles out there, ranging from probably a couple $100 to, you know, maybe not tens of thousands, but several $1,000s. So anyway, I'll try to make as best comparison as I can, and then that'll finish up this episode. And then the next episode or the next series will be the gantry crane. So I'll bring you back here in just a couple minutes, and we'll be doing some sandblasting. Now that I got you outside, I want to show you something I picked up last week that'll I'm going to be incorporating it into a project. On the trailer I built, I had plans, or do have plans, to build some sideboards for it that maybe come up 14 inches or so on the sides. That way if I wanted to haul some landscaping bark or a load of gravel or whatever, I could, and don't have to worry about it spilling over, and then I can just unload off with the tractor. And so I picked up quite a while back some sheets of what's called FRP, which stands for fiberglass reinforced plywood. So I think it's 3/4 inch plywood that has actual full layers of fiberglass on both sides. It's really, really tough stuff, pretty much waterproof. So I'm going to use that for the sideboards, and had intended on using lumber to build the framework. But when I was, if you recall, since my retail steel supplier shut down, I've been going to a local really large recycler, and so I swing in there every once in a while just to see what they happen to have. And so I swung in there last week, and they had, that gives you a view of it, they had, I'm guessing somebody must have went out of business and they bought it all. So there was, and I'm not exaggerating, there was hundreds of 24-foot sticks of 1 inch by 1 inch square tube, 1.5 by 1.5 square tube, all aluminum, 1/8 inch and 3/16 wall, and then some 1.5 by 3 inch rectangular tube, hundreds of sticks of that. There was also full 4x8 sheets of aluminum, varied thicknesses from like 32nd, 16th. I think there was some 8th, and there was hundreds of those sheets. So I bought enough of the aluminum to build that framework out of aluminum, so it'll last basically forever. And because they're a recycler, they just have a flat per pound price on their steel and aluminum. Doesn't matter what the dimensionally is, and their aluminum goes for $2 a pound. So I bought enough of that rectangular and square tubing to do those frameworks, and then I bought a quarter sheet of just aluminum plate or sheet good just to have around. I probably should have bought some more of the square and rectangular tubing, but I really didn't have a project for it. But at any rate, I bought 224 sticks of the 1.5 by 3, 2 sticks of the 1.5 by 1.5, and I think it was 2 sticks of 1 by 1.5, all 24 foot long, and it was like $260 some, so which is about half of what the price would be if I would go buy it new. And it was all brand new stuff. The sheet goods actually still had the protective plastic coating on it. So anyway, that's an upcoming projects that I'll show you guys. So I'm gonna get this tractor unloaded, and we will get the trailer pulled out and the welding table flipped over. Okay, so that went as planned. I'm gonna go take a lunch break and come back out, and I'll get the sandblast equipment drug outside, and we'll get this thing blasted. Got the sandblaster pressure pot filled up with some coal slags, so we'll get this thing knocked out. Okay, so that gets the bulk of it done. I wasn't trying to get a pure gray metal sandblast. I'll get you a little closer. I'm mostly just looking to take off, like I did on other stuff, anything that's loose, and put some of a bit of an etch on it. So you can definitely see that I accomplished that. That blaster could certainly get it to gray metal, but I'd go through an awful lot of media. So it's a little windy out. We'll see what it's like, if the paint's gonna try to drift too much or blow too much. I prefer not to paint in the shop because then that overspray gets on stuff. So we'll see how it goes. If it covers okay, if not, I'll either come back when the wind's slowed down a little bit, or move it just up in here closer to the shop where it's semi-protected. Well, this will be interesting when I went to the store. Obviously the caps is always the color. When I went to the store, I grabbed these because they were a satin color, and I noticed it didn't look super black on that, and my own fault for not looking. It's actually a dark walnut, so apparently it's going to be dark brown versus satin black. So figures, here comes the rain. I should have waited. Given it's just a welding table, it won't hurt anything. I'll pull the tarp after it quits, blow off what little bit of water there is, and keep going. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so there's probably maybe a few spots that the paint, kind of that underside view, so when it's flipped over, you're looking down at that might be on the rebar and stuff that might still be bare. So I'm going to flip it over, look for any of those, touch those up, and then it is done. So I want to try to flip it over without dropping it or getting dirt or anything else. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so here's the plan. We'll see what happens. Ultimately, nothing, I guess, can get hurt other than the paint scuffed a little. So I'm going to pick it on this leading edge. It's going to hinge on that back side, and it'll reach a point where it wants to flop over the other way. So when I kind of get there, I'm just going to go ahead and do a max lift. Hopefully the loader will come up just as fast as it swings, and then basically it'll just turn into a pendulum and hang there. Then I'll bring it down, touch it, and flip it the other way. So we'll see what happens. Well, no severed limbs or damaged equipment, so that went well. I'm going to get a few spots touched up and then I'll bring it in the shop. Alrighty, so yeah, paint's got dried. I moved it in from outside. Took the DA with a 36 grit, just knocked off any anything on the top, so it's nice and flat now. Of course, it looks all kind of one color because of the little bit of rust and the mill scale on the top. So that over time, as a person cleans it up each time with a grinder, that slowly will work that mill scale off. Like I talked, it gives you a place to hang clamps here. I didn't think about it, but the really long reach clamps like this, I got lucky. There's about 1.5 inches clearance to the floor. So in hindsight, I wanted them this height because that kind of splits the difference and gives you almost a 45-degree angle on these kickers. But in hindsight, it might have been nicer to also have, at least on one side, one more bar up here, which I could still always put that in later. One kind of advantage or a side advantage of this tube as well as the end tubes is since they're not capped, gives you a good place to put TIG wire or TIG rod. It rolls really nicely on those heavier duty casters, swings around, and when they're locked, it doesn't move around much at all. The design, again, I like with the open gaps so you can clamp anywhere, anything. So let's lay a straight edge on there and see what that looks like. Again, we'll use this super precision one. Let me actually grab some feeler gauges. Granted, this is just a level, but they're fairly flat. At least it gives a ballpark. So let's take something like, let's take 20 thousandths. It's not very much. Get a kind of angle so you got it. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it's hitting the level versus sliding underneath. Same thing there. It almost kind of starts there. Doesn't go there, doesn't go. Part of it too is that you can actually, if I zoom in here close, when they extrude this tubing, it ends up with a slight hollow in between the middle, so you can kind of see here when I hit it with the DA, it touches here and here. So there's going to be, no matter what I did, there would be slight variations here, but unless you're working on a part that's so small that sits in the middle, it'll just bridge across those two high spots. So if I check the feeler gauge out on those ends, that doesn't even want to start. Let's see if I can find one that'll actually fit. Let's cut that in half. There's an 11, just so you know I'm not lying to you. I don't know whether you'll be able to read it, if I can tip it right. You might be able to catch that. Trust me, it's an 11. I have nothing to prove to lie to you guys. Again, I'm not sure you can hear it, but that one there, it goes under that one, but not on the far side. So that one might be, maybe that one little spot there might be 15 thousandths, at least using this level. Just starts there on this one, and we'll go there on that. So So for the kind of fabrication I do, short of having this ground, it will be, I'm super happy the way it turned out, more than flat enough for what I do. Again, the height is kind of nice because as you can see here, I'm sitting in the chair. This chair is one of those regular computer chairs, so the strut I think will go up a little bit more. But if I was doing some TIG work, this is just the perfect height for me to rest my arms and work on that. But if I was to stand, if I'm standing, and was going to do some welding here, I'm not leaning over, I'm standing upright. This is just about right. If I wanted to see really close, I wouldn't have to bend my knees really much. So height-wise, I think it worked out about where I like it. So that wraps up the build. I'll take you, let me zip over to here to the computer and I'll show you a cost breakdown of what I've got into it material-wise, and you can make your own determination whether you think it was better to do like I did and build it, or if you would have bought one. So hang on here a minute. Okay, you can see here in this just basic spreadsheet that I only had 5 items, or in essence 5 items. The 2x4 rectangular tubing that created the top and the end caps. Again, that came from the surplus scrap place, and that was $90. The rebar also came from there and was $6. The legs also came from there, and they were worked out to be $5. They were pretty thin wall, so they were fairly light. The casters were brand new. Those were $32, and then a couple cans of paint, some miscellaneous stuff, probably the wire I used, and gas. That comes out to about $20. So you can see there the grand total to build it, as you saw in the video, was $153. So that's pretty inexpensively. I'll switch to a different tab here, and then we'll talk about what might be available for that same amount of money. So I simply just went online and started looking for different tables for sale. Kind of looked on it from the least expensive side initially. So those first 2 there, one's a Harbor Freight and one's from Vevor. The Harbor Freight's 36 by 24 inches, so about half the size. In fact, exactly half the size. The top is like 3/16, so it does have the setup holes in it, but as you can tell from the picture, it's probably not more than maybe 50 or 60 pounds, if that. So that's a little bit more money, actually. The only thing I could find less than was that second one there from Vevor. Again, it's less than half the size. It's a bolt-together affair. It does have some casters, but my guess is they're not nearly as stout. And then the last one, I really couldn't find anything similar, but I did find a couple in the 36 by 48 inch size, which is what I did. And this is just a top. Certiflat's a pretty good company, at least from what I understand. It's got some ribs underneath, so it's a pretty quality unit, but it is indeed just the top. You can buy a frame for it. So just the top alone is $489. So to me, it's pretty evident that in this case, like many cases, I was able to build it considerably cheaper and build it with some of the design features that I like. So you can make your own judgment whether you think that's the case or not. So I hope you enjoy the content, and you guys know what to do. Thanks.